Next. Here. When we're talking about, before the Pak Rainer talking about land acquisition, actually, this is about spatial planning. I mean, if you have like MRT, we are, have a problem with MRT. Why? Because if you look at our spatial planning, there's no MRT there. I mean, not MRT, LRT. There's no LRT there. There's no highway from Bandung, Jakarta. Not yet in our spatial planning. And if you go to the permit, what do you call it, agency, and you ask what do you call it, acquisition or and etc., you have problem with it because we don't have it in our spatial planning document. So we're struggling now how to put it in our spatial planning, but we try to put our permit process in one, what we call it, one-stop service board. So every single permit in Jakarta, you can come to only one agency, and you can find it in kelurahan, in kecamatan, in wali kota, and of course in a provincial area. We try to have zero delay. We try to have zero complaint, and of course 100% service excellence. But even now, if you have problem with let's say building housing permit or building permit, and you don't have time to go to the office, and then we can come to your office to get your document, and then we try to provide services to you. This is the way we try to make sure that our what do you call it, infrastructure project is we can do it in an appropriate way. And the next thing that we try to do is that we put all our planning and budgeting on internet to make sure that everybody understand, everybody can get involved in the process. They can put their idea there. Even the private sector can put their idea in our internet. Our internet website, and then we can process the idea, the advice through what we call it e-planning and e-budgeting. Next, and then when we're talking about the data, now we're trying to have a big data, but unfortunately, because of we just starting like 1 year ago, we have a smart city, but not with the big data with big B, but only with small b. But this is only the beginning. But later on, we can have a big data like what we have it and what they have it, Seoul has it now in their city. So I think that's all because I have 1 minute left. So thank you very much.
Terima kasih Pak Oswald. I'm already been warned by the organizer that we are running late, but this one is a very important topic. We haven't spoken about financing scheme, and I would let Raj Kannan here to explain a little bit about innovative financing scheme. Thank you.
All right, I will go straight to the point. One of the key innovative recommendation that we are exploring with the government is the notion of a limited concession scheme. Limited concession scheme particularly for an airport existing asset. It's not privatization, and it's in fact what we would call a triple win solution. I mean, most of you are familiar with infrastructure which usually have double win. You get win from the input from construction, and you get the win from the long-term economic benefit of the infrastructure asset as well. Under LCS, you also have the ability for the government to be paid upfront by the private sector. Looking at LCS, it's also not securitization. Securitization, you may have read in the papers, the government is exploring securitizing some of the existing assets. Securitization is a debt. LCS is not a debt. It is a direct investment by private sector. Now, again, I don't want to go through this. Let's just look at what are the options for LCS. There is the possibility of an upfront payment from the private sector to the government. There could be options where the payments are on an ongoing basis, on an annual or semi-annual basis, or it could be a combination of upfront plus ongoing basis. So in a very simplistic structure, the concessionaire, which would be the private sector, would be paying an upfront payment to the government agency that owns this asset. You would note that we are using the sample of Soekarno-Hatta Airport, and I'll explain to you why. And the concession is provided by the concession owner. In this case, will be the Ministry of Transport or the airport authority. The key advantages is, of course, all future expenditure on this particular asset is no longer the government's expenditure. The private sector takes over the expenditure on all future capital expansion of the asset. As well, the money that the government receives from the private sector can be used for other assets, or other airports, etc. Now, let's look at Soekarno-Hatta, why we are recommending the use of Soekarno-Hatta Airport. It is perhaps within the country is the most profitable airport. The second most profitable is Kuala Namu, but again, it's not comparable in terms of the connectivity index. Interestingly, Soekarno-Hatta has the highest connectivity index in Asia Pacific, ahead of Taneda in Tokyo and Sydney Airport. In terms of the current operating fundamentals, it's not as efficient as it can be. If you look at the EBITDA margin is roughly around 60% for Soekarno-Hatta compared to, say, for example, Sydney at 82%, Auckland at 74%. So there is ample room for increasing operational efficiency. And as you're aware, I mean, you've taken the airports, it requires considerable expenditure of capital investments going forward. If you look at a very simplistic comparison, Soekarno-Hatta, the revenue per passenger is about $5.50 US dollars, compared to, say, KLIA at $14, compared to Hong Kong at $22 per passenger, and Changi at $28 per passenger. So there is ample room in Soekarno-Hatta for monetizing by increasing efficiency. But you can only increase efficiency with additional capital expenditure, which is something the government will be struggling, or the state-owned enterprise will be struggling in this current climate of lack of capital funding. The key benefits for Soekarno-Hatta is, of course, as I mentioned, that it will leverage the current connectivity index of the airport to become a cargo hub or a hub airport within the region. We had a look at other smaller airports like Kuala Namu, but in comparison to Soekarno-Hatta, this is really not as attractive for the private sector. You may have read in the papers where I think Ministry of Transport is exploring the option of awarding or selling 45% of airports with a view that funding can be used. Our view is, if the private sector is going to be investing in any existing asset, the only value that will be adding is efficiency. Efficiency can't be added if you buy minority stake. If you cannot operate an airport with your funding, then it's pointless exercise. I guess that's one of the reasons why we are using Turkey as a simple example. In 2005, Turkey started with a concessioning of their most profitable airport, the Atatürk Airport in Istanbul. The government was paid $3 billion by the private sector consortium to take over and run the Istanbul airport for 17.5 years. Very limited concession. $3 billion upfront was paid to the government. But following this major investment, which was very attractive to the private sector, Over the next 10 years, there were 8 other smaller airports that were transacted where the government received $2.8 billion in upfront payment from the private sector. During the same time, the same 10-year period, there was an additional 16 billion worth of investments in roads, in PPP hospitals, in metro. So one policy decision that started by the government with the most attractive asset generated over $22 billion in investment. That is what we are proposing to the government. If you are serious about getting private sector investment, then be serious. Providing 45% equity in an airport in the middle of nowhere is not going to solve the problems that we need to solve. We need to be serious about bringing private sector investment, and the only option in our view is to start with the best asset you have and don't sell the asset. All we are suggesting is you do a limited concession scheme. Thank you.
I would like to thank you all my panel members here. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your presentation. And we hope that from this presentation, we all gain something useful moving forward. Thank you.